Good morning, everyone. I'm Jim Rooney, President and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to today's event, Talent and Competitiveness in 2025, Finding Opportunity in Uncertain Times, that we're proud at the Greater Boston Chamber to be working with our friends at the Massachusetts Business Roundtable and McKinsey to produce. We've got more than 200 people registered and on this call, so the topic is clearly on the minds of business, civic, and nonprofit leaders in Massachusetts. And we know that as business and civic leaders, we're all navigating uncertainty right now in our business operations, and that uncertainty is creating a level of paralysis in terms of business decisions, including in the space of hiring. At the Chamber, we remain committed to advancing our competitive edge, and that means using our expertise and resources to find opportunities amidst these challenges, working with all of you. We've got a great group of experts from a range of industries and platforms that will be joining us today. Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development, Lauren Jones, my friend J.D. Chesloff, President and CEO at the Massachusetts Business Roundtable, and Mike, Ethan, Anav, and Michaela will be more formally introduced in a few minutes by my friend J.D. I do want to give a shout out to Chamber Board Chair Jeff Rudnick, Chamber Board Member Jeff Rudnicki of McKinsey for his continued support and leadership in efforts like this. So thank you, Jeff. Now, fifth, I think, Massachusetts Roundtable survey in partnership with McKinsey. JD will correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I think it's the fifth. But this one found that the state's competitiveness is under threat. I don't think that's any surprise to this audience, driven largely by the high cost of living and doing business as well as evolving federal policy. We've been challenged before. This is not a moment to slow down, but instead we need to consider the ways in which we have to pivot and advance opportunities amidst these challenges. Our workforce and businesses are depending on us to leverage our strengths, which include our talented workforce and innovation to bolster a resilient economy. At the Chamber, we'll continue to partner with groups like the Massachusetts Business Roundtable, AIM, and the Massachusetts Taxpayers Foundation to share our collective business voices and competitiveness agenda. So let's get into the program. To start, leaders from McKinsey will share an overview of the survey results and what it means for all of us. Then we'll have a group of panelists discuss how this affects our business community, our workforce, and our competitive edge. But before we do begin that, I do want to note for all of you that this program is being recorded and the presentation will be shared with attendees and available after it's done. So now I'll introduce our presenters from McKinsey, who will give an overview of the talent and competitiveness survey results. First, we have Dr. Michaela Krishnan, a partner at McKinsey Global Institute, which is McKinsey's business and economics research arm. Michaela's research focuses on topics related to sustainable and inclusive growth, including climate risk and the net zero transition, globalization, productivity growth, and gender economics. Her most recent research focuses on the net zero transition, adaptation, and physical climate risk across sectors and geographies, including the implications for companies and countries. Thank you, Michaela, for joining us today. And next, we'll have Anav Day, a partner at McKinsey & Company. Anav is a leader in McKinsey's pharmaceutical and medtech practice, serving clients across a range of topics, including operations strategy, product development, procurement and sourcing, and manufacturing and supply chain. Anav is based in Boston, but has worked with clients around the world, including Canada, Australia, India, and parts of Asia. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michaela and Anav for some interesting presentation of the survey results. So take it away, Michaela and Anat.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Jim and JD. We're very excited to be sharing the results of some of the recent survey we did with companies in the Massachusetts region on competitiveness and talent in the state. As you've probably picked up from Jim's introduction, both Arnav and I love data, so there will be some data that we want to share with you, but I think it'll help frame up some of the conversation that we're about to have on both the challenges as well as opportunities for the state. So with that, let me share my screen and we can get started. So as Jim mentioned, this is the 5th year that we've been running this survey. And we're excited because it's also given us an opportunity to look at trends in competitiveness and talent for the state over time. It's been an exciting opportunity to survey more than 50 companies representing a broad range of industries as well as sizes. And so we think with this, we have a good snapshot on the pulse of what businesses is feeling and experiencing in the state of Massachusetts. So we'll go through each of these points in detail, but just as a quick overview of the findings from this year's survey. The first, again, as Jim already mentioned, is that the state's competitiveness faces challenges. As we looked at the results of the survey, this theme that keeps coming back is flashing red lights on warning that are warning us in terms of challenges that we're experiencing, and what those challenges are becoming increasingly evident. It's the cost of housing, cost of doing business, and quality of infrastructure that have repeatedly showed up as challenges that businesses are experiencing. And maybe one way to think about it is that the flashing red lights are now a solid red, and it's really time to start to tackle these issues. And we'll hear more in the panel on how we're thinking about tackling those issues. The second, and this is, I think, a new challenge that is being experienced, is the role that federal policy uncertainty is playing. And we are seeing that manifest in how businesses are experiencing challenges. It's delaying investment, hiring, as well as a broad range of business decisions across companies in the state. But what all of this means is that businesses are rising to this moment in time. We're seeing businesses deploy a whole range of solutions to try and tackle these challenges, try and tackle headwinds. And that ranges from talent-friendly policies of various sorts, but also increasingly optimism about the role of AI, both in raising productivity and performance and addressing a whole host of talent issues. And then finally, a resounding sentiment across businesses that Massachusetts has enormous opportunities, and it is really this moment in time to make the most of these opportunities. Those range from opportunities in AI, but also rethinking collaboration and partnerships across business and business working with the state to navigate and strengthen both talent and competitiveness for the state. So let's dive into this. So as we mentioned, the first point around competitiveness, if we think about Massachusetts relative to other states, the good news, which you see on the left side, is that from a GDP per capita as one measure for incomes in the state, as one measure for quality of life, for living standards in the state, Massachusetts actually is very, very highly ranked. We're number 2 across the United States on this measure of GDP per capita. But if you then look at the data on the right side, which is the growth in that GDP per capita, we see that we're losing momentum. Our growth in GDP per capita over the last 2 years put us as the 42nd ranked state on this measure, at growing at 1.3%. And so while we're starting from a really good vantage point, we are losing ground and now are among the bottom quartile of growing states. And you see this reflected in results from the survey. When we asked companies across the state what are some of the biggest challenges they are experiencing, 3 have stood out, and they've stood out across 2021, 2023, 2025, with growing rates of concern. And these challenges are cost of doing business, cost of living, and quality of infrastructure. You see, for example, that in this year's survey, 69% of companies we surveyed said that cost of doing business represented a significant challenge for them. 67% said that cost of living in the state did, and 45% said that the quality of infrastructure did. So while we start from a really good vantage point, there are things that are creating real challenges for businesses in the state. Arnav, let me hand over to you.
Yeah, I think as Jim mentioned, right, we have been doing the survey for the past 5 years, and the three issues that Mekla raised were issues that had come up in almost every single one of those surveys. What we found was different this year is some of the trends that have emerged in 2025 are also top of mind concerns for businesses. So we asked businesses that what do you expect will impact your organization the most in the next 12 months, right? And the top three issues that came up were trade related concerns, primarily tariffs, the changes in federal policies, and then there was a fear of an economic recession. On the first point on tariffs, 3 out of 4 businesses felt that this was a material risk to their business. While this has a nationwide impact, I think the impact for Massachusetts businesses is higher because the base cost in Massachusetts is higher, as Mekla highlighted, compared to some other parts of the country. I think the federal policies also pose a higher risk to some of the pillar industries in Massachusetts, like healthcare, education, technology, and clean energy. So we double clicked into the trade related concerns because that was by far the top one, and asked folks what would be their expected impact from tariffs and what are some of the actions that they are taking to in response to the tariffs. So on the first, the expected impact, really, the two sort of themes that jumped out was one, the broad macroeconomic uncertainty that everyone is feeling, and the additional costs that will either burden businesses or get passed on to the customers, right? So those weren't those were expected. I think what was actually slightly concerning was some of the actions that folks were taking. So there were the first three, which were internally focused actions, like building analytics capabilities or diversing supply chains. But the last two, which are highlighted in blue, were externally focused, right? And could have a material impact on the economy, which was putting investment decisions and hiring decisions on hold and increasing the prices of products and services. So how would that then translate to the economy? And we tried to look for some leading indicators. So if we go to the next page, and what we see is that about 80% of the employers surveyed expect no growth or a reduction in their Massachusetts footprint, which would be a leading indicator for growth in the outer years coming for Massachusetts, right? So if you see about 6% are considering reducing presence in Massachusetts, about 1/5 are considering adding roles outside Massachusetts, and then a big chunk, 50%, expect no change in their footprint. So they don't expect to grow. So which poses a material risk to growth in Massachusetts as we look forward. Mekla, back to you.
So now that Arnav has succeeded in frightening us all, I think the positive news coming out of this survey, though, was that employers are not sitting on their hands. They are rising to this occasion in various ways to try and address some of the challenges and address some of the uncertainty that is being experienced. One area in particular that stood out was related to talent. And employers across the board are taking a variety of actions to both improve hiring as well as retention of talent. By far, the number one, which about 3 in 4 employers are undertaking, is adjusting salaries in alignment with the higher cost of living and the industry benchmarks. But there are also a whole host of other measures being taken. This includes things like professional development opportunities, increased benefits, increased flexibility and ease of working, as well as mentorship and sponsorship programs. What we're also seeing, I think quite uniquely in this year's survey versus past year's surveys, is the advent of AI. I think what emerged from last year's survey was excitement on the part of employers to think about the role of AI. I think what became abundantly clear in this year's survey is that it's not just excitement, but it is translating to actual actions and actual opportunities related to AI that companies are thinking about deploying. And so again, employers are thinking about a whole host of productivity and performance related opportunities. The ones in blue highlighted on the page are the ones that are pertaining to AI and technology. We're seeing about 69% of companies exploring tools like data and analytics to drive performance and productivity. We're also seeing about 63% of employers think about various forms of data-related tools to improve performance management, things like HR analytics. And in addition to that, beyond AI and technology, there are also other things that we're seeing employers do. We're seeing employers think about skills training, career development, about ways to improve operational efficiency, as well as to thinking about performance-driven incentives to improve their productivity.
So we asked the employers, right? If you had to look ahead and see how you could solve these issues, what would you do, right? And what was very evident from the survey is that people realized that this issue can't be solved by one institution. So an overwhelming majority, 75%, showed interest in partnering with their peers or with the state to tackle these competitiveness challenges. We asked them what would be the areas that you would focus on, and two really came up to the fore, right? I think by far building an AI ecosystem was an area where there was overwhelming interest in. I think employee training and workforce development programs was another topic where folks showed interest. We also did interviews with a select group of folks, right? So beyond these, if we go to the next page, there were really four themes that emerged. AI, of course, was top of mind, and the interest in building the AI ecosystem and positioning Massachusetts as a leader in AI was something that there was common interest in. Clean tech was another area of interest that emerged. I think an evergreen area from past surveys as well was housing, and that was top of mind for people. And there was a lot of interest and momentum in helping tackle the Massachusetts housing issues. And fourth, I would say there was a strong interest from companies in partnering with the state so that each side can contribute to problem solving and develop policies that will help address some of the underlying root causes which are hampering Massachusetts competitiveness. So I think that if we had to then summarize, right, we had three reflections. One, there are some real issues that we need to tackle. Two, the current economic environment is making some of those issues worse. But three, and which gives us a lot of optimism, is there is a lot of enthusiasm and momentum in the state to actually do something about these issues and position Massachusetts as a leader coming out as we look ahead 3 or 4 years, right? So I think even though the survey showed some things that we need to tackle, coming out of the survey, we are really optimistic about about mobilization in the state to actually tackle these issues and position Massachusetts well for the future.
Great. So with that, we will actually dive into exploring some of these issues as part of a really great conversation across stakeholders. So JD, let us hand over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mekhala and Arnav. And a special thanks to the McKinsey team, Lucy, and others. You folks have been really true partners in this over the last 5 years. The work is exceptional. The partnership is exceptional. I just want to thank you for engaging with us to do this. I think it produces really rich and helpful information. So thank you for that. Also want to thank Jim Rooney, my good friend, and the folks over at the Chamber for co-hosting this. Jim, your team is outstanding. We really appreciate all the work that went into pulling this together. So thank you. Thank you also, of course, to the MBR team, Tanya and Lauren for all the work, and of course for putting up with me. So thank you for that. And so let's get the conversation going. If we can get the panelists to come on camera, I will introduce them quickly. I will say I do like where you ended, Arnav, and what we can pick up there, sort of this note of optimism. Yes, there are challenges, and yes, they'll be exacerbated by what's happening federally, and we're all spending a lot of time working on that. I do like that the survey uncovered some opportunities and solutions, which I want to get into a little bit in this conversation as well. So with that, let me quickly introduce the panelists, and then we'll get into a little bit of a moderated discussion here. So first, my dear friend and the Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development, Lauren Jones. Welcome, Madam Secretary. Ethan Govan, the Head of Government Affairs for the Northeast for Google and a roundtable member. Welcome, Ethan. Thank you for doing this. Lucy Perez, Senior Partner in Boston for McKinsey, also serving on the roundtable board. Lucy, thank you so much for being here. and Mike Tomasi, our good friend, the president and CEO of AccuRounds, who is a member of the chamber, and brings a really unique perspective to the conversation. So thank you all for doing this. So let me start with you, Madam Secretary. What do you think? Like, what are your overall impressions? How does this compare to what you're seeing and hearing out there when you're going across the state talking to employers? And in particular, with the challenges identified around the cost of living, hiring out of state, what strategies are you thinking about to break down barriers to employment and tap into untapped talent pools right here in Massachusetts?
Well, thank you for kicking off with that question. And certainly thank you, JD and Jim, for organizing this panel. The survey, this topic is very well timed. I think first and foremost, I will certainly want to make sure everyone listening today know that in these times, most especially, but please know that Governor Healy, Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, and our entire cabinet are closely monitoring the impact, the potential impact, the economic headwinds in our respective areas, and also working collaboratively as a team, knowing that these are unprecedented times, but it's really important that we're also engaging with employers, industry, labor, for these kinds of active conversations. And I think in the spirit of collaboration that your survey identifies. We remain steadfast as well in making sure that we are driving an agenda to be more affordable, more equitable, and more competitive as a Commonwealth. And this builds on a lot of successes that we've seen, whether it's advancing tuition-free community college, the win through the Mass Leads Act and investing in and creating greater leads for life sciences, climate tech, and AI, our housing bond bill, and more. For me, as Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development, I certainly have the opportunity to work with and hear from employers. Most recently, in the last couple of months, especially in these times, it's been really helpful to be touring all the different mass hire regional workforce areas that we have in this state. We have 16, and that really means clusters across the state, from the Berkshires to the Cape, of employers coming together, labor coming together, academic partners coming together, workforce training providers at the table to think about what are the top industries locally in these regions, how can we work together to build collaboration and meet the needs that especially employers are seeing now, but also in the future. And through these tours, it's helpful because I'm meeting with and hearing from employers who certainly are experiencing tough times right now, but are also leaning into and dipping into the resources they know work in partnership with our mass hire resources. And I know Mike Tomasi is a perfect example, a person on the panel today where AccuRounds has been able to benefit from teaming up with mass hire and our menu of resources for employers. I would say, as we think about how companies can dive into this work with us, love the fact that employers are looking to team up together and also looking to team up with the state. And we want to make it easy for employers to do so. So first, if there's any takeaways for notes from today, employers, I encourage you to check out mass.gov/workforce. That's our kind of front door to make it easier for you to navigate the resources that we do have. Second, in the spirit of collaboration, I would encourage you to raise your hand and work with us, because at the end of the day, when we're looking to create more opportunities for those who are unemployed or underemployed, or we're looking to upskill existing workers, it starts with understanding what the needs are among employers and influencing whether it's curricula or a new job training program based on what employers are looking for. And having employers guide that conversation is essential and important to have them at the table. And we have some great programs through our menu, again, mass.gov/workforce to make it simple for you. And that can be employers coming together as a cohort collaboratively, whether it's for registered apprenticeship. So say you're a manufacturer and you're looking to come together for a shared need like CNC machining, or your life science company and you're looking to do lab technicians. We have examples of cohorts coming together through registered apprenticeship, but also other work-based learning programs that meet the needs of what employers are looking for, whether it's a 12-week program or a 2-year program. So I really would encourage that kind of collaboration and leaning in to doing that as we look together to attract, retain, and develop talent.
Great. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Whether it be talking to you or other members of the cabinet or right up to the governor and lieutenant governor, there is this singular focus, to your point, in the administration on competitiveness issues and a real willingness to partner with folks in the business community. We're very grateful for that. So you teed up Mike Tomasi very nicely. Mike, as you know, from the survey, we keep hearing this concept of uncertainty, right? Whether it's tariffs or changes in federal funding or immigration policy or whatever it is, we saw in the survey that it's really impacting investment and decision making. So how does that resonate with you? How are those dynamics affecting your business, manufacturing in general, and how is it changing your thinking about hiring and investment?
Thanks, JD. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, great question. It's been uncertainty is a great word. Challenging is another word. Looking back, starting in maybe mid 23, there was a bit of a dip in manufacturing in general in our industry, which kind of carried the malaise through most of 24. We've actually seen a bit of a pickup in business, which may be a little bit contrary to what we're hearing. But it is mixed. In talking with peers, I'm getting across the spectrum of people that are busy and people that are really struggling because companies or customers are putting things on hold. And the situation at AccuRounds, we've actually won two parts back that we lost to overseas competition a few years ago, mainly due to the tariffs. And we currently have an opportunity in front of us from a company in Pennsylvania, a global company that is importing work from Germany, and they want to bring it stateside. We visited their company in Pennsylvania. Their chairman of North America is coming here in a couple of weeks, and it's a big opportunity for us. So in that case, that's a positive. I say that, but I also want to make people aware that, listen, there's a lot of challenges that we face as well. We buy material in Europe. There are tariffs. We have to pass that along, and that's not easy. We buy tooling overseas as well. That's more difficult to pass on because that would have to come through pricing, and we really don't have pricing power. Our customers want to pay us less, not more. We have to lean on continuous improvement and process improvements to generate that margin so we can maintain pricing. Probably the most challenging situation for our industry and for us in particular is capital investment. The equipment that we purchase, CNC machines, the secretary just mentioned, primarily come from Europe and Japan. So we've actually haven't purchased a new piece of equipment yet this year. We have a quote in front of us from a machine in Switzerland. The tariff used to be 4.7%. Now there's 10% on top of that, stacks up to almost 15%. We will probably place that purchase order next week. However, we had put into that quote the opportunity to back out if tariffs go higher than where they're at now, because it would not make the return on investment would not be there for us to purchase. So that's challenging for us because we need to constantly invest. It's a very capital intensive business, manufacturing. You need to stay up on technology to compete. So that's certainly a challenge. From a hiring standpoint, we've heard similar of what's been reported so far today, a lot of pause. We actually hired someone out of the program, the Unique Label Academy at Excel at Bridgewater State, that started a couple of weeks ago. But we're not out aggressively looking to fill roles right now. We're gonna take the increased work if it comes through overtime and our current staff. Training. The secretary mentioned apprenticeships. We've had a few people graduate from apprenticeship programs in the state. We have 4 people currently enrolled in an 18-month program in conjunction with AIM. I can't say enough about what the state has done and the secretary and the administration in their investments in training and skills development. It's super, super critical for us to stay on top of that because the technology continues to change, whether it's hardware, software, AI, you name it. So we have to continue to invest in our team members here. Housing never used to be a concern of mine, but in the last couple of years, we had 3 people leave to move south. A couple were close to retirement, one wasn't. And I just was talking with one of our warehouse personnel yesterday, and he's early 50s, and he's talking about in a couple of years moving south. So we've never had to face that challenge, but now it's impacting our business, which It's kind of interesting to me because we know the cost of living is high here, but it's never come to fruition, and now we're seeing that. I'll leave with this. Our manufacturing ecosystem is pretty vibrant and robust, contrary to what maybe the common perception may be. And it was never more true when the Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative, which I co-chair, spun out the Manufacturing Emergency Response Team during COVID. And we saw how valuable our infrastructure was to support our hospitals and our healthcare industry. We pivoted companies on a dime to make gowns and face masks and ventilator equipment and whatever. So it's super critical that we understand that and realize that. I can't thank the administration enough for propping up the Center for Advanced Manufacturing. That was about 5 years ago, but the current administration has maintained that. That didn't exist, and it's a tremendous support for us. And we're thrilled that they continue to support that through many types of funding. So that's kind of the state of the state right now from a manufacturing standpoint, JD.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. That was a terrific overview. Thank you. The pluses and minuses of the moment we're in, right? I think you did a really great job of articulating that. And I will say this, for me, one of the biggest takeaways from the survey was what you said about housing. And I think there's a blurred line now between cost of living and cost of doing business, right? Which I think is really interesting. So, Lucy, what popped out for you, right? We've been doing this together for 5 years. As you look at that survey over that time, what has emerged for you? What surprised you about this year's data compared to what we've seen over the past few years?
First, let me start by saying thank you, because it's really like such a privilege to partner with you, JD, and the whole MBR team and so many employers in doing this survey, right, as we've been doing for 5 years now. And, I was reflecting, I think we've probably touched over this time about 100, right, or so of the largest employers in Massachusetts. And what's really cool about this data set, because we've been doing it for 5 years, is this ability to look at some of these longitudinal trends and not just a moment in time, right? Some things, unfortunately, as much as we would have liked to see them trending differently, have not changed, right? And so when we talk about this, we've used a lot this language of the red lights are flashing when it comes to the state of Massachusetts competitiveness. I think that's very clear. And as you and Mike were touching on, I think what's becoming increasingly clear is that the cost of living, particularly housing, right, should be considered a cost of doing business, right? One of the data points from this year that really stuck with me was 74% of the employers that we engage with mentioned that the cost of housing is really hurting the ability to attract and retain talent. And 73%, almost all of them, right, were saying that they have increased their salaries as a result. So really creating this very strong link between that cost of housing, cost of living, and cost of doing business. When I think about this year's results, right, like there's 4 themes in particular that stand out for me. The first one is how much things have shifted. When we did the very first survey, it was 2021, right? And it was all about COVID, right? And that was the uncertainty that was driving the decisions that employers were taking. Now it's all about what I would say the national uncertainty around tariffs, federal challenges, right? That is what's driving, in a lot of ways, the decisions. And oftentimes that decision, as Mike alluded to, is about pausing. It's about pausing investment, whether it's capital expenditures, whether it's new hiring, and delaying expansion plans, for example. But it's this belief that we should wait and see, hold resources before taking action, right? So that's a general new theme that we had not seen before. I think the second one that's more of a continuation from what we've seen in the past is how employers are shifting where talent is based. And you can see this also in reaction to that increased cost of housing. So 3 years ago, for example, when we started asking this question of how much of your workforce is, do you have out of state for those companies that are headquartered here, that amount has grown from having been like 70% of the organizations 3 years ago to then, the 2 years data, 75%. And in this most recent data, 85% of organizations have at least some staff outside of Massachusetts, right? That is a massive increase to go from the 70% to 85% over 3 years, right? What it also validates, right, is that hybrid and remote work are here to stay, right? And they're part of the tools that employers have in this war for talent that we're seeing continue to take place. The third theme that I think stands out this year, and we heard quite a bit on it from the presentation Mekhala and Arnav did, is AI as that core lever for performance and productivity, right? And it shouldn't surprise us, right? We look at workforce growth being flat, economic pressures are rising. And so AI is really being seen by a lot of the employers that we surveyed as a key to staying competitive, right? Close to 90% of employers are saying this is going to boost the economy. 80+% think it's going to help with hiring and retention. And importantly, to echo what Mekhala said earlier, it's not just about excitement, it is about action, right? Like the adoption of AI is really accelerating across all types of organizations and very different use cases that we're seeing. And then maybe to end on a more positive note, right? Like I think for me, the fourth like standout theme from this year is the concept that Madam Secretary alluded to, collaboration, right? We really see much greater interest and desire for collaboration between employers, across employers and the state, and really recognizing that particularly if we think about AI, workforce development, or talent pipelines and how to make those stronger, these are great areas for a stronger business government relationship. And so I think that creates really exciting opportunities for the state to lead and not just be reactive, right? But really shape the ecosystem for competitiveness a lot more. So maybe I'll pause there, but yeah, a lot of meat in this year's report.
Yeah, no, that's great, Lucy. And I agree with you on that last point. It's really what organizations like mine, like the Roundtable and like the Chamber do, right? It's sort of how do we make sure those relationships are strong and productive? And I love the fact that there's wind in those sails for folks like Jim and I and others to do that work. Ethan, let's drill down a little bit on Lucy's number 3 point around AI. So as she mentioned, more than 80% of employers in the report say they believe AI will actually support hiring and retention, which is kind of different from the anxiety we hear about the potential impacts of AI on the workforce. What's your take? Like, how should companies be thinking about AI as a workforce tool for performance and productivity? And what promising approaches are you seeing in your work at Google?
Yeah, thanks for the question, JD, and thanks MBR and the Chamber for organizing this event. Should come as no surprise, I'm optimistic about AI. I'm thrilled to see the optimism shared among 80% plus of the employers in this survey. I guess I'd break my answer down into 2 parts. First, I want to talk about kind of the macro trends and then get to kind of the specific examples. But I think at the macro level, like AI represents an enormous opportunity to boost productivity, economic growth, but business leaders, government leaders need to be very, I think, intentional and deliberate about how they talk about it. Like this is something that will boost productivity, augment people's abilities, boost productivity. Like it's not necessarily something that's going to necessarily just improve efficiency and that's it. And the reason I bring that up is important because, you want to get the buy-in of folks. You want to get the buy-in of your workers. You should be transparent when you're talking about why we're adopting AI and how we're going to use it. And just to give 2 examples about AI's impact on the workforce that we've seen. One is Geoffrey Hinton, who's, he's considered the godfather of AI. He talked about 10 years ago, he talked about how in 10 years' time, radiologists will no longer exist. It won't be a profession because AI is just going to do all that work. And not only has that not come to pass, there's actually a shortage of radiologists, and radiologists have needed to adopt AI tools to make themselves more productive, which is a little bit ironic. And that's not to throw any shade at Geoffrey Hinton, who's a computer science genius. It's just to say that if he can get that prediction wrong, I think anyone can get it wrong. And anyone who says we know exactly how this is going to impact the workforce is probably lying. The other example I really like to talk about is David Otter's research. David Otter at MIT, he talks about the introduction of ATMs in the 60s and 70s. And, if you're a bank teller at that time and you hear, oh, my bank's going to be installing an automated teller machine I think it's fair to be a little nervous about employment. But the fact is that teller employment actually grew over time for a couple different reasons. And the first is that teller ATMs actually took over the more routine cash handling tasks, freeing up time for bank tellers to focus on time with customers, more complex tasks. And then the other is it actually just made it more cost effective for banks to open up new branches. And so you saw employment in that field actually increase over time, which is pretty wild. So again, the outcomes can be counterintuitive. And I think employers should be, excited about this opportunity. They should embrace it and be transparent about how it's going to help their employees. But dialing it a bit on the specifics, I mean, I can talk about my field specifically. I work in government affairs. There are a lot of ways I utilize AI that save me a lot of time, improve my output. For example, I use Notebook LM. It's a Google product all the time. I can kind of upload documents, long legal policy documents, and kind of create my own little database and ask it questions, get reports. I can even turn it into a podcast to listen on a commute. I use it to create slide decks really quickly. What have been several hours of work, turned into 20 minutes because I gave it the content I wanted to see, the number of slides, the style. There's so many ways you can play around with it. And even just something as simple as, instituting a corporate policy where AI is just going to take notes at your meetings. So everyone is fully present. No one's worrying about taking notes or remembering action items. And these are just like a few specific examples. I'm not even going to touch on AI as a research tool for scientists, as a coding tool for software engineers. But again, in all of these instances, it's augmenting and improving the person's job and their output. It's not necessarily something that's just, taking over. And, I think that's going to be the trend. I think, it's crucially important that people are familiar with AI and start experimenting with it. I think companies should encourage their employees to get familiar with it, take training programs. And, this actually probably goes back all the way to our public education system. There are a lot of things we can do here, but I think the Commonwealth has just an extraordinary opportunity to tap into this. They've been doing all the right things. The Healy administration with the AI hub that they got across the finish line last year, making the right public investments. I think it's just a really exciting time for Massachusetts. And, I look forward to seeing how the state moves forward with this.
Yeah, thanks, Ethan. There's a couple of ways we've been thinking about AI workforce here at the Roundtable. That's one, sort of how does AI augment or impact workers in their current positions and current jobs? And then the second is something that I want to ask Secretary Jones about, which is, the administration really has focused on creating an AI ecosystem here, right? I mean, it's part of the Mass Leads Act. It's a real focus on, the government talks a lot about applied AI, and that will need a workforce, right? Building a workforce for AI, for the AI industry. Can you talk a little bit about that, Madam Secretary? Sort of what do we need to build that pipeline to make sure that we're supporting a new industry here or a growing industry here?
Yeah, I think we need to lean into a lot of the momentum, and there is some momentum thanks to the passage of the Mass Leads Act, and soon after Governor Healy and our administration standing up the AI hub through the Mass Tech Collaborative. But we know that technology moves at a fast pace. And I think, as Ethan said, we have to also be very diligent in how we think about this. From a workforce perspective, and as secretary, I want to make sure that employers as well as workers are able to embrace this technology in a way that doesn't leave anybody behind. It's a huge opportunity, certainly, to ensure greater productivity, but we want to make sure that workers are able to access the training themselves so that they can be just as productive. And if there is a change in a workforce, given the adoption of technology, what does that then mean for the impacted workers, and how can we upskill them with, say, AI technologies or other advancements so that they can pivot into a new opportunity as a result of the shift within the workforce? So I think a real focus on talent retention is important, and it unlocks proven models that we know have worked when we think about upskilling. The administration has a workforce training fund that we've used for now probably a couple decades. It's a fee that comes through the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, where employers are actually already paying into. And it unlocks a whole inventory of, and I think Accurance has used this as well, it unlocks a whole inventory of programs to upskill your existing talent, from lean manufacturing to project management to ESOL for work. And similarly, how can we think about that for the AI training that we know, especially small businesses and mid-sized businesses are looking for, but in a way that upskills individuals and doesn't replace a set of workers. And I think through this whole strategy, something that's very important for the administration is making sure that we're not leaving people behind. Far too often, when we think about our labor force, there's individuals that have often been overlooked, people that have often been put on the sidelines because of access. And we want to make sure that we're reducing barriers, and we don't want AI to then create another barrier. And so I think this opportunity really presents ways for us to be, again, very collaborative with industry, make sure we understand the needs of what employers are looking for, but also think creatively and in real time to make sure that we are providing that pathway for people to get the training that they need and be nimble, recognizing that we weren't talking this way about AI 2 years ago, and how can we make sure that we are remaining nimble and flexible, and again, making sure people have access to be part of this innovation that I think know is going to be here to stay, and just be really, really intentional and thoughtful so that our workforce can benefit from it, and our workers as well as employers can also benefit from it.
Yeah, Lucy, you have any thoughts on this? I mean, I know that you see through the work at McKinsey, there's a lot of discussion around AI workforce and where that's all heading. Do you have some thoughts you want to share?
I mean, I would just echo what Madam Secretary was just saying, because I think this is indeed a great opportunity as you think about how can these tools both help to augment, right, like the capacity that exists, right, like make workers more productive, but also facilitate the upskilling and reskilling into new areas of opportunities, right? And what is really exciting is that I think we're beginning to see the signs of both of these taking place. And it's the organizations that are leaning into these, right, that are already seeing very positive contributions, not only to the bottom line, we often think about that efficiency, but actually to the top line as well, in terms of like new products and services that are now possible and being created.
Yeah. Ethan, any final thought on this one, just in terms of building that AI talent pipeline?
I think Secretary Jones and Lucy covered it very well. The only thing I would add is thinking about this, from kindergarten all the way to universities and workforce training programs. I was thinking about this the other day, but when I was in elementary school, I was, learned how to type on a keyboard, playing a game, and that was like one of my classes, and that skill has obviously helped me throughout my life. And I was just thinking, like, what's going to be the AI equivalent of that sort of thing? And I think the states that adjust that and make it equitable and open to everyone through their education system, I think will have an advantage in the medium to long term.
Yeah, no, thank you, Ethan. I think you're right. So final question. I'll start with you, Mike. Just if you could leave the audience with one priority, one insight for how Massachusetts can stay competitive in this moment of change, what would it be?
I'd say continue the investment in training and innovation. Specifically, I mentioned CAM, which didn't exist 5 years ago, and there's funds that are funneled to them. And one of their best programs, I think it's the best program the state has ever come up with, we're in round 6 or 7 now, is the MMAP, the Massachusetts Manufacturing Accelerate Program. It's a matching capital grant program that provides funds to purchase equipment and technology. And that's what we need to remain competitive. You were talking about AI, and I equate that to robotics and automation a couple of years ago. That's not going to replace people. It's not going to take jobs away. It's going to take the mundane work over, allow our team members to be upskilled, and make us more competitive locally, nationally, and globally.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Lucy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we can sugarcoat this, right? Like Massachusetts is in a tough spot, right? And this is why this concerted action between public and private sector is so essential on all elements, right? Whether we're talking about talent, that cost of living, cost of doing business, as well as an innovation, right? Innovation is critical as we think about what needs to happen here. For me personally, I get really excited by the spirit of collaboration that was evident, in the survey and all the conversations we had. And then I think also about the fact that the state really has the ingredients that we need here, right? I think about the focus on these world-class research institutions we have all around us, right? The experience with reskilling, right, that Secretary Jones was, for example, referring to earlier, right? And the strengths in many of these sectors, right? I think life sciences, healthcare, technology, finance. I think if we truly come together and work together, we can actually turn this moment of challenge into a real opportunity for long-term advantage. And so for me, it's really that we really take on, if I go for the sports analogy, which I don't always do, but say it's time to play offense, right? And really think about how we collaborate to win together. Yeah.
Yeah, Lucy, just to interject for a sec, that's a big takeaway for me, and I'm actually pretty excited about that opportunity as well. I used to work in years ago in early childhood advocacy, and there was a woman I worked for who talked about bringing together unlikely allies to solve problems. And that's what you were just talking about, right? You bring together all of these sectors. It's not just me and Jim talking to our folks. But I think that unlikely ally concept cross industry to address what's going on right now and the willingness that we saw in the survey to engage in that is a pretty exciting takeaway. I mean, you're right, we're up against it, but we also have the talent and the willingness and the ideas and the ecosystem to address it. So I agree with you on that one. Ethan, final
and by
thought.
the way, JD, and leaders like you and Jim that bring us together, right, to drive that collaboration. So thanks to the both of you.
No, thank you. Ethan.
Yeah, I'll leave some of the other, important topics about housing competitiveness to others more qualified to speak about them. I think they're all important. We can't just choose one thing. It's got to be, all of the above strategy. When it comes to AI, I just think Massachusetts already has so many inherent advantages, excellent education system, world-class universities. I think if Massachusetts can establish itself as the place where people want to go to study AI, to learn about it, to train themselves on it, everything else will follow from that. Employers will see an AI literate workforce, companies will want to be here, move here, expand operations. So that's what I would leave you with.
Yeah, I agree. And Jim, I'm sure Jim can talk about this when he comes back on, but we saw this firsthand in Toronto last year in the city to city trip that Jim convenes, that the chamber convenes. I mean, they're doing that, right? And there's competition for that industry and for that talent in AI. But I agree with you. I think we're well positioned to compete. All right, Madam Secretary, final word, bring us home. If you could leave us with one priority or insight for how we can stay competitive in this moment, what would it be?
Well, I'll lean into a lot of the comments that folks have already said, but I'll lift up this notion of Massachusetts and our talent really being our calling card. Lucy, I think you spoke well to this and the strengths that we have. And now is the time to be even more competitive. I think certainly over the last couple of years, Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll have definitely been very competitive. They have that competitive team spirit, and we want to make sure that we're building that big tent so that all partners can come together. I think when I look back over the last 2+ years, 2.5 years, we really have focused intentionally to bring in more people into the labor market. We need to make sure that as more people come into the labor market, they're gaining the skills to then be competitive and help meet the needs that employers are looking for. We know that we're also growing jobs. We have been growing jobs here for Massachusetts employed workers. And we want to make sure that we stay very closely connected to employers to understand your needs so that we can continue in this competitive spirit. And I'll leave on one last note. I think as we figure out all of this, we think about our playbook, as we think about how to stay competitive, I really would encourage folks to keep people in mind, front and center, and have this people-centric approach, whether that's the people being employers and the needs that employers are looking for, or the people that we want to make sure we are getting the great access and skills so that employers can thrive and thrive even more in these challenging times. And so I appreciate that we can do so in Massachusetts collaboratively, convenings like this. And I know that there's so much more work that we can continue to do together. So I'm encouraged by all this, even though there's some down points that were shared, but there's also some highlights as well. And I really am going to lean into that and kind of collaborative spirit that I think we have here to make us hit some more wins in the months and years to come.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we acknowledge the issues. We know they're out there, and we need to come together to address them. I think that's the big takeaway. Thank you to the panelists for your insights, your leadership, your authenticity. Very, very grateful for the conversation. So with that, I'm going to throw it back to my friend Jim Rooney to wrap us up.
Okay, great. Boy, I enjoyed that. The survey presentation, the conversation. There were times I wanted to just sort of jump into the middle of it all and either ask questions, share some insights. That was really terrific. So thank you, Mike, Lucy, Ethan, Anab, Michaela, all terrific. I want to compliment JD and the MBR team for putting this all together, and especially as you think about the topic of competitiveness, linking for this conversation, talent is a distinctive competence and competitive advantage of Massachusetts as a place that we need to center our strategy. As the secretary said, think about people as you think about competitiveness and the talent skills of the workforce that have sustained our growth and economy for really generations. So thanks for doing that. Several people said this, and I'm going to pick up on Lucy's using a sports analogy. I really think there are challenges, but we're dealing with these issues from a position of strength. And on the sports analogy, I feel like the Boston Celtics a little bit here because, a year ago, world champions, a great sort of core of players and coaching and ownership. A lot of the ingredients are there, but it's a competitive league. And we saw that this year, and we're in a competitive environment, and we just have to continue to be bold about it and not shy away from that. And I think about the housing bond bill. I think about the AI hub. I think about the money that we're putting into rebuilding the T and fixing transportation. We didn't get into the infrastructure quality issue that came up number 3 in the survey, but certainly there's some focus on that. So I just say, look, yeah, there's a game to be played. We're in a competitive environment. We've got some headwinds. We've got some challenges, but boldness is never let us down. And then finally on the AI, I thought that was a fascinating conversation. We did a survey of our members earlier in the year, and much like what you saw today, we found that over 80% are implementing or experimenting. 2 big things about it that came out of our survey was that people don't feel like they have the in-house expertise to sort of truly leverage it, and they're looking for that. So there's a high finding there, and a big hunger for training in AI as well. So AI is really something that is going to be part of the solution here. I'll end there, and I'll just remind people that this is recorded and the presentation will be shared. And once again, thank you to my partner, JD Chesloff at the Massachusetts Business Roundtable, to the folks at McKinsey for doing all this work. And thank you to all the attendees who came today to join us for this conversation. So have a great rest of the week, and thank you again.